Make sure I don't. Okay, so there's this place, or there was this place not far from where I live, where you could go to school to become a professional clown. And I mean that seriously. A full accredited program. 10 weeks. You studied Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton the way film students study Kubrick. You had homework. You had a final exam. Except your final exam was performing in front of a live circus audience. And if you weren't good enough, you just didn't graduate. You didn't get to be a clown. They just sent you packing. Florida be weird. And this isn't some weird community theater program in a strip mall somewhere. This was the official, backed by the Ringling Brothers, actual institution clown college. Legitly. In Florida. And not even a big city, but in Venice, Florida. Which, if you're not from around here, is a small Gulf Coast town that is mostly retired people and a decent beach. And it's absolutely not the place you would expect to be the epicenter of American clown culture. And yet... Anyway, so quick heads up, these streams are basically my creative lab. If you're here live, feel free to jump in. And if you're catching this later, just hang out and enjoy the spiral. So here's how this started. John Ringling, the circus guy, one of the 5 Ringling brothers, moved the winter quarters for the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus to Sarasota, Florida in 1927. And if you think about what that actually means, it's kind of strange. The whole circus just wintered here. For fun. All the trapeze artists, the lion tamers, the acrobats, and the clowns, every off-season, this whole community of performers just relocated to this Florida town. And Sarasota was small enough at the time that this was a thing, a legit thing. People would go to watch them practice. Families would show up at the winter quarters just to hang out with the circus performers between sessions. The clowns were the most accessible, apparently. And so Sarasota and clowns kind of became linked in this weird local cultural way. Fast forward to 1967. Irving Fields buys the circus. He and his brother and a judge from Texas buy the whole thing for $8 million, which, accounting for inflation, is still kind of a bargain for the greatest show on earth. And Feld looked at his rosters of clowns and realizes something. These guys are all in their 50s. Every single one of them. And they've been doing the same exact bit for decades. If you'd seen the show before, you're going to see the exact same clown routines again. And there was basically no one coming up to replace them. No one was choosing becoming a professional circus clown as a career path at that point. So, Feld does what he does, and he actually creates a school. So the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Clown College, based in Venice, Florida. Totally free. No tuition. You just basically had to cover your room and board for 10 weeks. And if they liked you at the end, they'd offer you a contract with the circus. And the contract was mandatory acceptance, meaning you had to take it if they offered, which no exceptions, which is its own interesting kind of power dynamic worth noting. And the school ran from 1968 to 1997, 29 years. It trained 1,400 clowns. And I want to pause here for a second because I think that number is sometimes easily glossed over. 1,400 people went through this program over 30 years and came out the other side as professional trained clowns. That's not a niche hobby. That's an institution. Penn Jillette went through this program. Bill Irvin, who's a legit Tony Award-winning Broadway actor, went through this program. This isn't a joke. Well, okay. It was literally about jokes. But you know what I mean. This is usually the part where it hits me that this place is just quietly stopped existing. There's no monument, no museum. The building in Venice is gone. 1,400 professional clowns trained in my backyard, and most people in Florida don't even know what happened. Kind of strange when you think about it. Okay. I promise there's a point I'm gonna get to. You'll see. So the program itself, once you dig into it, is genuinely fascinating. Classes included makeup application, costume design, acrobatics, juggling, stilt walking, pantomime. Students watched films of Chaplin and Keaton. They studied Wile E. Coyote and Bugs Bunny the same way you'd study a master class. The whole session was essentially one extended audition, with instructors silently evaluating you the entire time. And if you weren't demonstrating what they needed for the next season's show, you just didn't get the contract. The school was specifically a think tank, like it was intended to be, as students were expected to develop new gags that could actually be used in the circus. You weren't just learning the craft, you were generating the content. And then in 1977, Feld's son Kenneth shuts it down completely. The reason given was that after nearly 1,500 graduates, many of whom were now teaching others, the pipeline became self-sustaining. They didn't need the school anymore, which is kind of a beautiful thing, but it's also kind of sad. The institution worked so well that it made itself obsolete. And then in 2017, the circus itself closed after 146 years gone. So, clowning as a profession has this long formal history, and Florida is the center of gravity for it in America. That part is real and documented and slightly surreal if you think about it, if you live here. But here's this other thing that happened to clowns culturally, and it runs almost directly parallel to the clown college era. And it's impossible to talk about one without the other. John Wayne Gacy. If you don't know who that is, which maybe a few of you. So in Chicago, 1987's, sorry, Let me rephrase that. College. Chicago. 1970s. Serial killer. 33 victims. And he performed as a clown named Pogo at local events, children parties, charitable fundraisers, hospital visits. He was really good at it. He designed his own costumes, taught himself the makeup, and by all accounts was a genuinely entertaining performer who people enjoyed. And the whole time he was also, the other thing. We don't talk about that. So when he was arrested in 1978 and his crimes came out, the media latched onto the clown angle immediately, and the phrase killer clown entered the cultural vocabulary in a way that it never really left. And here's what I think is really interesting about that, from a storytelling and cultural perspective. Gacy didn't use the clown persona to commit his crimes. He wasn't murdering people in the costume. The clown was his public face, the accessible, friendly, community-engaged version of himself that gave him cover and social capital. The horror wasn't that clowns were dangerous. The horror was that the performance of harmlessness can be a very effective disguise. There's actually a line, and I want to be careful because this is just chilling to read, where Gacy, when he is being surveyed by detectives in the days before he arrests, sat down to breakfast with two of the officers following him and told them, clowns can get away with murder. He said that to detectives while he was a murderer. I don't know if that's the most horrifying thing ever or the most audacious, and it could be a little bit of both. I'm not gonna lie. And if you're watching live and you're sitting with that for a second, yeah, me too. Me too. Oh, I need a break for that. So here's what Gacy actually did to the cultural mythology of clowns. He gave people a real-world anchor for a discomfort that already existed. Because the fear of clowns, chlorophobia, has a psychology that predates Gacy by a significant margin. There's actual research on this. The leading theory is the uncanny valley effect. Clowns look almost human, but not quite. The makeup exaggerates features past the point of normal. The painted-on smile means you genuinely can't read their emotional state. You look at a clown, and you can't tell if they're happy, angry, afraid, about to cry, because the visual signal, the face, has been overridden by performance. And your brain finds that deeply unsettling in a way that operates below the level of conscious thought. You're not afraid of the costume. You're afraid of the mask. You're afraid of not being able to read the person behind it. Researchers found that the number one driver of chlorophobia isn't a scared experience with a clown. It's the uncertainty of intent. Because you can't tell what a clown is going to do next. And that's not irrational. That's actually pretty reasonable threat assessment. And when Gacy comes along and says, hey, that low-level instinctive distrust you had? Turns out that was right, actually. Stephen King's It was published in 1986. right in the middle of Gacy's child coverage saturating the media. King says his inspiration for Pennywise was the idea of a monster under the bridge, a troll, something ancient that preys on children. But he said he also wanted to tap into a childhood fear, and that fear was clowns. And it's not hard to look at the timing and think the cultural anxiety about Gacy was sitting in the background of all of that, whether consciously or not. Pennywise is Gacy turned metaphysical. The performance of harmless fun as the delivery mechanism for something utterly lethal. And what's interesting to me is about Pennywise as a character is that the clowns, specifically the form it takes when it appears to a group of children, because the story suggests that it chooses the form that represents a kind of universal base level fear. The clown isn't just scary to the kids in Derry. The implication is that the clown is the most lowest common denominator of human fear. That says something very particular if you think about it. That's saying something about what clowns represent psychologically that goes deeper than just jump scares and jokes. Okay, so we've got the historical shit out of the way. Now we've got the cultural horror inflection. And now I want to get into the thing that I actually think is the most creative angle here, which is what happens to clowns as a character type as a result of all this? And what do writers do with that? Because somewhere between the Ringling Brothers Clown College producing 1,400 trained people and John Wayne Gacy murdering 33 people in costume, the clown archetype got completely colonized by two things: circus nostalgia and horror. And both of those are, frankly, kind of limiting. There's so much more sitting inside the clown as a narrative figure than that mostly goes unexplored. I think let's talk about, I could be saying this wrong. I'm sorry. If I say it wrong, let me know in the comments. Anyway, moving on. So let's talk about Pagliacci for a second. If you know the Watchmen joke, but doctor, I am Pagliacci, you've been brushing up against one of the most important operas ever written without even realizing it. Pagliacci is a 1872 Italian opera. The story is about a man named Canio who leads a traveling theater troupe. He plays a clown named Pagliacci on stage, a comic character beloved, the crowd's favorite, of course. And he finds out midday that his wife is cheating on him. And then that night he has to go out and perform. And he has to put on makeup and play the buffoon and make people laugh while his actual life is disintegrating. There's an aria in it. Put on the costume. Translated to English. Where Canio puts on his clown makeup while essentially having a breakdown. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. And the score literally instructs the singer to dissolve into sobbing. The phrase that comes out of it is "Ridi Pagliacci," laugh, clown. Laugh at your broken love. Laugh at the grief that poisons your heart. Because the people have paid and they want to laugh, and the show must go on. That aria is the blueprint for the tragic clown archetype. And it shows everywhere once you start looking. The painted tear on the cheek that becomes standard in clown iconography. I'm tripping over words tonight. The painted tear on the cheek that became standard clown iconography comes from this. The Smokey Robinson song Tears of a Clown is literally referencing the clown Pagliacci in the lyrics. Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons is Pagliacci in Springfield, a performer who's visibly depressed, estranged from his family, addicted, failing, and the joke is that none of this stops the show. Bart's whole arc with Krusty is about a child who worships a man who is clearly not okay. And nobody is doing anything about it, and the performance keeps happening anyway. That's not a clown and circus story. That's a story about how we consume entertainment without asking what it costs to the person providing it. And then there's the Joker, which is a different beast, but fascinating all the same. Because the Joker, specifically the one that leans into the Pagliacci reading, which is the serious modern take, is a clown archetype used explicitly as class commentary. The 2019 Joker film is basically asking what happens when somebody performs happiness and normalcy for a society that has completely failed them, and the performance becomes unsustainable. Author Fleck literally works as a professional clown. He is performing joy for children's hospitals while being beaten in an alley. He is told to smile while his medication is cut off. The breakdown isn't random. It's load-bearing. The costume isn't the horror. The system that created the need for the costume is the horror. Now, I'm not saying the 2019 Joker is a perfect film or the perfect representation of Joker himself. There are legit criticisms of it, and I have some of them. But the creative choice to ground the villain's origin in the conditions of performance is doing something genuinely interesting. It's using the clown not as a symbol of childhood fear or nostalgia, but as a figure who represents what happens to people who are required to perform wellness they don't have. That's a real thing. That's a character. And I keep coming back to this performance as survival angle, because I think that's where the real story lives. And it's something that's almost entirely absent from how clowns show up in fiction. Most of the time, the clown is either a vehicle for nostalgia or dread. The in-between, the person who wears the costume because it's Tuesday and they need to pay rent and also their marriage has fallen apart, gets barely explored at all. Why is that? I don't think many people kind of understand that there's always a deeper reason for how things work out. Don't you guys? Let me know in the comments below, because it makes things interesting, doesn't it? All right. So here's where this lands for me specifically. See, I live in Lake Placid, Florida, which is a real town. It is not in New York. It has an entire mural district and calls itself the Caladium capital of the world. And it is. And I say that with complete affection because it's my weird little town. Venice, where the Clown College actually was, is over on the Gulf Coast. Not exactly in my backyard, but very much the category of this is the state I live in and I have feelings about it. But the part that gets me is Lake Placid has its own clown school. Toby's Clown School, right here. Separate from Ringling, unconnected, just existing in my town quietly, the way Florida does things. I found that out and sat with that for a bit. Because, of course it does. Of course the town I live in also has a clown school. I don't know what I expected. So, I'm not just adjacent to this history in a general Florida way. I'm apparently living next door. The weird specificity of that place that takes itself seriously about something that sounds like it shouldn't be. And that's the thing about Florida, actually. This state has an unbelievable density of real things that sound made up. Such as a mouse-based empire in Orlando that, has its own fire department, postal code, legal jurisdiction, all of it. The Clown College, a city named Venice, a city named Paris. we're a little weird down here. Anyway, so the creative lesson I'm arriving at is this. When you put something genuinely weird into your story, the story gets better if that weird thing actually has weight behind it. Not, would it be funny if there was a clown college? But a man named Irvin Feld looked at his aging roster of performers in 1967 and decided the solution was to build an institution, make it free, and for 30 years it ran, and it mattered, and then it quietly ended. That's not a quirky detail. That's a world. That has texture. That has the weight of something that actually happened to actual people. And the specificity of it, everything, makes it feel real because it is real. And if your fictional world has elements that feel like they have that kind of weight behind them, readers don't question them. They don't pull back. They lean in. Because the brain recognizes the texture of something that has been inhabited even if it can't articulate why. The evil clown sightings of 2016 happened because the cultural mythology around clowns had been built up over decades to a point where the image alone wasn't enough. And if you don't know what I'm referencing about, it was when people in clown costumes started appearing near schools all over the country. Just randomly standing in the woods. And it was a genuine national panic. I lived through that. I know. Ugh. Crazy people. Anyway. So, that image, though, the clown in the woods at night, did a tremendous amount of work because it was the accumulated cultural weight behind it. Gacy, Pennywise, the uncanny valley, the unreadable face, that image meant something. That's what real-world specificity does in a story. It's not just add a detail. It borrows the weight of actual human experience and applies it to your fiction in the way it shows. So what can you actually do with this in your stories? If you're writing something and you want to use clown-adjacent characters or institutions, ask yourself, are you using the clown as a performance of survival? Or a performance of horror? Or a performance of jokes? Because each one of those create a different kind of clown. And if you're looking for more places to follow this kind of energy, Florida's a genuine gold mine, and I will be talking about as many as I possibly can. And I think it gets underestimated, honestly, as a setting because people default to the obvious versions of it. The theme parks, the crime stuff, the Florida man framing. But we have, mermaid shows, manatees come up, dolphins, we have SeaWorld. As I've done a video on them. Really cool. But, and it's like, it's this whole cultural moment down here. Like, just even sitting still. You get to see so many different things. But here's the thing that I wonder about the Clown College closing in 1977. The stated reason was that the pipeline was self-sustaining. The school had done its job a little too well. And within 20 years, the circus itself was dead. So what does that mean when an institution succeeds at its stated purpose, and that success is part of what makes it obsolete? Because that's not just a clown story anymore. That's a story about how craft traditions live and die. About what it means to train a generation in something, to really invest in it, and then watch the world stop needing it in quite the same way. I don't have any answer to that. I don't think there is one, to be honest. But I think the best stories live right in the middle of all of that mess. And the real world is what keeps them from tipping into either sentimentality or oblivion. You can feel the weight of something that was real. You can, excuse me, you can write towards that weight, and your reader will feel it too, even if they can't name exactly what they're feeling. Clowns, it turns out, are not just for circus and horror. They never were. And that's kind of where I want to end this today. If you're working on something and you're stuck on this exact problem, or you want a second set of eyes on it, I do offer direct feedback and editing. That's all in my link tree below. And if you're curious how I apply this stuff in my own work, my books are down there too. They're short, they're $5, and they exist. This is WriteSparky, and we will see you in the next one.